What's up guys, this is Darkbblue, a gamer who loves Souls-like games, looter games, and every game that involves build making. With more time into Lies of P, I find that its combat might be much better than most people think. However, it does fail to reach its true potential. So let me tell you the real form of Lies of P's combat. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's dive right into it. At first glance, Lies of P encourages players to focus on Perfect Guard, which eventually leads to the White Bar Stagger where you can perform fatal attacks. However, both Perfect Guard and the White Bar Stagger are painful to use. Next, it's time to know the 3 ways through which you can experience much better combat. First, as for the interaction between enemies and the players, you have several options to avoid being attacked. Perfect Guard is only one of them. Another choice is to dodge. You can also find the blind zone of an attack and thus evade it without even dodging it. For example, some nasty slow attacks of the Clown Puppet can actually be evaded in this way, which also gives you a good chance for a charge attack. As stated in my previous videos, the reason why the interaction in Dark Souls 2 is interesting is that you evade in both temporal and spatial dimensions. This time, Lies of P achieves a similar result, which means its combat should also be interesting. Second, the White Bar is not the only stagger mechanic that exists in this game. In fact, there is an additional Poise mechanic. So Poise staggers are much easier to cause yet less rewarding as they don't allow you to perform fatal attacks. As you can see now, this dagger, which is definitely not a White Bar Stagger, is the Poise dagger we are talking about. Of course, such an easy to cause dagger is very handy in combat, but being handy is different from being fun. For example, in Sword and Sanctuary, another Souls-like game, Poise daggers are especially useful as some bosses can even be stun-locked, but it's not a fun mechanic. So why do I say the Poise mechanic in Lies of P is fun? This is related to how you deal Poise damage. Not with simple and basic light attacks, but with diverse fable arts and weapons assembled by yourself. In Lies of P, making builds is related to how you stagger enemies in real combat. We know such beginner-level build-centric designs are usually solely about damage, so it's good to have a game where it's related to both damage and stagger efficiency. Third, you are provided with means to knock enemies down. I'm always interested in this ability and it's good news for me. Well, it's time for a but. What I just said now is solely based on the theoretical potential of Lies of P. I try to interpret how this game's combat is designed and eventually derive this potential. But in the real Lies of P we are playing, many poor designs are preventing it from reaching it. For example, I said you can choose from Perfect Guard, dodge, and locate a blind zone. However, we know dodging is barely better than the Perfect Guard. And as for the last option, let me tell you how ridiculous it is. As you can see, you won't be able to move instantly after an attack as there will be a post-attack animation. It can be partially cancelled by Perfect Guard and dodge, but not by basic moving. Well, since it's deliberately designed so that players won't have a good time using other means to replace Perfect Guard. As for the potential of combining build making with Poise Dagger, on one hand, it can cause serious balancing issues as light blades seem almost useless. On the other, you will have to finish more than half of your playthrough before you really get something that is good enough to cause Poise Dagger. For example, Light Puppet Blade is in Chapter 8, and your first fully upgraded Legion Arp won't show up until Chapter 7. In the end, irrationally hardy enemies, the P-organ system, and many other designs that make no sense at all add to this mess. Eventually, although I can derive a high potential from interpreting its combat design philosophy, what we actually play is far worse than that. I'm also thinking, well, that perhaps When I'm more experienced and expertise at this game, it'll become closer to this potential. And this may be exactly the reason why some players I know in person are really enjoying Lies of Peace combat. However, I seriously doubt if I won't give it up before that secret is revealed. With that being said, the issues with Lies of P are not fully discussed yet. What I just said is what I, myself, as a player who already understands the true potential of this game's combat actually experience. However, most players won't understand the potential at all, resulting from disastrous promotion and in-game guide. For example, starting from the demo, most players have reached a common sense. This game encourages a perfect guard-centric combat. So many people making the same mistake must indicate something wrong in the game's own design. For another example, we know there are only two major stagger mechanics in this game, the white bar and Poise. However, the Poise is never mentioned in this game in any form. I discovered it totally based on my own observation as an experienced Souls player. Now we can see what most players are playing due to disastrous promotion and in-game guidance, what players who understand this game's true designs are playing, and its theoretical potential are three totally different games. So let me give my review separately for the three games. If we look at its theoretical potential, well, it's a very brilliant game. Even if we consider only its interaction, it's already at the same level as Dark Souls 2. Then by adding the Poise mechanic, I think, well, it's not too aggressive to say it's as good as Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3. Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3 do have much better enemy mechanic designs, but Lies of P combines what it has to offer with a build-making gameplay, putting itself at a different yet reasonable position. So if we compare it with FromSoft's games, I think it's, well, as good as their late games such as Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3. And if we compare it against other Souls-like games, Lies of P is well above the level of throwaway Souls-like games, as it has decent combat designs. Well, but if we consider what I am playing, I think it's only an average level throwaway Souls-like game. And for most players who are still struggling with perfect guard, Lies of P is a bad throwaway Souls-like game. I know it has good map and art designs, but you have to defeat enemies to experience them, while this game is trying hard to prevent its players from doing so. In conclusion, I hope future patches can at least partially fix the issues I mentioned. If you like my story or want to join me into depth of games, remember to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, see you around.